Okay, are we good? Yep, I can hear it. Good evening and welcome to the West Perth December 5th council meeting, our first meeting for the month of December. Hard to believe. Anyways, we'll call the meeting to order. First item, we'll have a moment of reflection for those that wish. Okay, thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is confirmation of the agenda. It's a large, fairly large agenda, but do we have one addition of the agenda, recommendation 2.1, that we approve the agenda as amended to add 6.7.6 to the agenda. Do we have a motion to accept the agenda with that addition? Moved by Councillor Phelps and seconded by Councillor O'Donnell. All those in favor? That is carried. Andrew, you're looking puzzled. Do you have a question? No, you go ahead and ask.
I just didn't quite catch what you were adding to the agenda. What is the addition? Oh. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't have my mic on, but that's what it was. All right, brings us down to, does anybody have a conflict of interest with anything on the agenda tonight? Okay, the consent agenda is there. There is a total of 24 items, fairly large consent agenda. Is there anything there that anybody would like a little more clarification on or would like pulled and dealt with separately? Deputy Mayor Jankowski.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I would like to endorse the request by Stratford City Council. They're requesting that stable funding be provided to the Via Rail system. That would be a benefit to not only Stratford, but the West Perth and the entire region.
Okay, we can pull that out. We can deal with it right now if you wish. I also had it marked on my agenda. Driving home from Toronto last Wednesday night was not a pleasurable drive by any means, and there's just no train schedule or GO train for people from this area to get to Toronto and back in a day. It just doesn't work. So if you want to move that, Dean.
Yes, I would so move that.
Do we have a seconder for that particular motion? Take your pick, Councillor Rose. Any further discussion? I've kind of highlighted a little bit that it's just a pits for train system right now. There was at one point, I think, a few GO trains coming in, but there's nothing shows up on the web or anything at all. So I think it's a good idea to support it. So any further comments? If not, ready for the motion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Okay, so is there anything else that anybody wants pulled out? Okay, so we'll deal with consent agenda items 4.1. Oh, sorry.
If I could, there was a couple of pieces of information regarding the changes to the development charges that I didn't understand when I was reading through the letters from Watson and Associates regarding Bill 23. I got a bit confused on the difference between Bill 23 and Bill 73. I was hoping that I could have that clarified by somebody more knowledgeable than me, and also if Jeff could explain how the phase-in of the development charges actually works, because I'm sure he knows.
Jeff, can you take a crack at it?
So I'll start with the second question first. I think we're all looking for more information on the phase-in. Actually, Wendy might be the very best one to explain the potential phase-in. So while Wendy's coming up, because Wendy has been attending the seminars by Watson. Again, this is a large moving target, and we're trying to get together. We're trying to just catch up, let alone, develop opinions on it. And on the difference between Bill 23 and Bill 73, 23 is the More Homes Faster. I think is the other one. What's the number on the other one? That's the mayors, the strong mayors, I think. Three, Bill 3. So is that the one perhaps that you're referring to, the other legislation? I just don't know the other reference, and I'll take a look through while Wendy's answering the question.
So I don't have like a detailed response to the phase-in, but the phase-in is a new incentive for developers. So the phase-in, we currently have a phased-in development fee, and that's something council has put in place. So now this is the province putting a phase-in approach so once we get a new study, whatever our fees are, they will be phased in. And there's a certain percentage allotment each year. Off the top of my head, I don't know those. But that's the phase-in.
How significant is the difference between what Bill 23 is proposing and what we do?
Just on the phase-in. So currently the phase-in that we have in our study is something that's been council approved. And what Bill 23 is proposing is that it's mandatory. So it's no longer a council's decision to phase it in. It is something coming from the legislation that allows a phase-in. Does that help answer your question?
I believe so. Thank you.
I'll just add, I mean, the consequence is the financial implications of the municipality having to carry the cost from the date of approval until the date of implementation. And, there's so many variables in terms of how much uptake is there going to be, what are the interest rates going to be, how is the changing construction price, index going to go? There's many, many variables. And so, obviously we've got municipalities that are taking, trying to make a case to the provincial government about the significant cost this is to municipalities. They've chosen in their wisdom to go ahead and approve the legislation. So whether we spend a lot of time modeling what the outcome is or how we figure out whether we spend our time trying to mitigate it, we're going to have to make a decision. But right now we're still trying to make sure we understand it, frankly. It's changed at a pace that we've never seen before.
Councillor Rose, you had a question as well? Yeah. Seen a single municipality yet that supports it, and that's unusual, on any type of bill that the province would bring forth. And the other part that I find very confusing is the timeline for feedback hadn't passed yet, and they already put it into law. Like, they didn't wait for all the consultation to happen. So I don't know what's going on, but from our perspective, and I shouldn't say too much more because I'm not by any means right up on it, but I think in some of the smaller municipalities such as ours, it's going to have the opposite effect. If the municipality is responsible for placing the infrastructure in, putting all the services in that in, like we're not a cash cow here.
And if I may, I think there are some unintended consequences that are possible. I mean, in the course of making decisions, and I'm not suggesting that our municipality would do this, but in the course of making decisions, if one of the choices you're contemplating is whether or not you want to go further into debt because you have no other way to finance the front ending of these agreements, municipalities might be tempted to turn down applications which would otherwise be successful. And I that would certainly be an unintended consequence. I don't want to leave it unsaid that there's also good things in the legislation. And, we're all focusing on some of the negative things. There is red tape being eliminated. Some of the things they're doing with site plan approval, I don't particularly like, but some of the changes are probably good changes, but you need time to get process in place. So for example, I think it was the last meeting, we had the conversation about, no site plan approval for less than 8 units or 10 units, which in our experience, you want site plan to be able to control grading and drainage and the kinds of things you can regulate your site plan. Just like fences make good neighbors, so does a good site plan with drainage. And there's probably a way to mitigate this by having your zoning bylaw require that they meet our development approval guidelines or our development design guidelines, but we have to get our design guidelines updated and then get our zoning bylaw amendment. But in the meantime, we're sitting ducks for applications that we may not be able to control, and drainage problems don't go away. They don't, in fact, they get worse over time as land settles. And so the kind of short-sightedness of the rush is concerning, but we're just having to adapt to it.
Murray again?
Okay, I guess I kind of misunderstood it then, Walter. I thought when they said development charges, was that not just above and beyond? This really isn't development charges. It's like when your contractor, say behind me, they're putting in that street. Well, from what I understand, the contractor pays for everything, like the street and all that. Yeah. And they're saying now we pay for it and then they'll pay us back later.
No, it's so it is related to development. And I want to first of all say that we should all, when it comes to new development, you want to rely very heavily on the principle that development pays for development. So our development charges bylaw, which was adopted by West Perth in September of 2019, identifies major projects which the municipality will contribute to that are development driven. So there's developer benefit, immediate developer benefit. So when we do roads, we often have the developer has to pay for their direct cost of the road that they're building. And the way we handle that is we have the developer build them. Some municipalities build roads like that through development charges and build them themselves. So by that choice alone, our development charges system is less complex than larger municipalities. But we do have to have development charges for oversizing of pipes in streets. We will add the rail crossing for the new West End rail crossing for Mitchell would be a development charge where any new homes applications that are made in the community would be all paying a little bit towards that rail crossing. But if it was an existing service, we'd have to calculate how much of the existing community benefited and how much the new development benefited. And the existing would have to be covered by levy and the new would have to be covered by development. One of the principal problems with this legislation is that if the municipality is carrying the cost of money for extended periods of time, it means that we're using levy, which is existing taxpayers' money, to fund new development, which goes against the principle of development pays for development. And it's unfair. It's a question of fairness, the fairness to existing residents to not be paying or subsidizing the cost of housing for new residents. And so fundamental argument or discussion. And so we have development charges, Councillor Rose, and we have had cases where developers have come to us and asked to defer. We did make a decision to defer one, but we made that on a case-by-case basis because we wanted to create an incentive. This is an incentive for everything. And if you allow everything to achieve the benefit of that deferral, that cost isn't built into our financing. And so we have to figure out what that's going to mean to us. Do you want to add more to that, Wendy?
Yeah, so the phase in, back to the phase in how, and I'll do simple math. If our end rate was 10,000 and it was phased in over 5 years, so it goes 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. The first year for DC would be 2,000. We can't, the levy picks up the rest. So if it's $10,000, 2,000 comes from development charges, 8,000 comes from the levy. And if you cross It's called cross subsidization, and you can't do that. And so this phase in will cost the municipality money because we have to finish off that phase in with the levy. So hopefully that makes sense.
Okay. Doug, go ahead.
Sorry, and it's also, they're talking about waiving some of right now protected like wetlands and agricultural and greenbelt area that right now receives some of that drainage and stuff, and then we have to put reservoirs in and other things to supplement that also. So there's other effects there that they're trying to fast track some of this. Is that correct?
Yes, and so there are other components to the legislation other than just the development charges changes, and some of this is opening up the green belt, which is an issue of, a promise that was made to hold the green belt, and the green belt is really intended to, number one, protect agricultural land and natural resource lands, but number two, to also achieve a compact development form. And I believe the greenbelt concept was to sort of limit the speculation, which if you allow developers to speculate on land value and you don't have clear lines of where the wall is, as Bruce Potter would say, where the wall is, then you end up that it becomes a fait accompli. It sort of, the demand and the speculation drives the next incremental step outward. So I believe the green belt was intended to establish a wall. The concept was you build a wall to have a wall. And if that suddenly is removed because of we're in a new situation where we need housing, that's fine. But it was brought in for the purpose of establishing a limit, and removing it has a lot of consequences. It's sort of the faith in every decision that governments make about wall, the line for development, and trying to give certainty for land speculation. And you can only imagine if you were a landowner that sold in the last 2 years when the green belt wasn't open for business and sold at a certain value, and now the land's worth a lot more, you would feel very unfulfilled. And I'm certain there will be a lot of angst about that. And I'm sure there was angst when the green belt was brought in. So this kind of disruption on land speculation and everything's very complicated. And yes, the next part of it is opening the green belt. Obviously, the first target is agricultural land, which again, we want to protect agricultural land. We want to force compact form. We want to force development to go up and not spread out. But then secondly, they've said, and perhaps you want to go to wetlands and woodlands and other features because we need land so badly and we are desperate. And look, I don't for a moment want to downplay the significance. The 1.5 or 1.6 units in 10 years is a real number. And any of you who have children or have friends who have children looking for houses can, I think, recognize that the housing market's very tough for entry-level buyers. And so they need to do something. It's just a matter of the urgency and the kind of, there doesn't appear to be a lot of wisdom. And I'll say too, development will still be required to do environmental requirements. So, you'll see a lot of developments, especially when you get to Stratford, where they do large areas and have stormwater management ponds. And we've got one at Clayton Street. We've got a stormwater management pond. You do have to build those components in your development. We just can't toss them away. So that's still going to be part of development. And I don't think you're going to lose on, you're not going to give up on stormwater management requirements. But if you started going into wetlands, you would have an impact downstream, which is another whole. There's been 50 years of protection of wetlands to protect the people downstream. And if we throw that out because of a knee-jerk reaction, it'll be a very costly endeavor in the long run.
Okay. Any more hands going up? Great question, Andrew. Anyways, as Jeff said earlier, it's a moving target, and I think there will be lots of information coming out in the very near future. So thank you, Wendy, and thanks, Jeff, for that. As the first meeting, isn't it going to be fun? Okay, motion here then that we accept the consent agenda from 4.1 to 4.24 with the exception of 418 that we've already dealt with. So moved by Councillor Rose, seconded by Councillor Phelps. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move into the public meeting at this time. So I will call the meeting to order at 7:26. The public meeting is being held in accordance with Section 34 of the Planning Act. And at this time, I'm going to ask Clerk Hobson for the purpose of the public meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this public meeting is to allow interested members of the public the opportunity to ask questions or offer comments about a proposed amendment to bylaw 100-1998, the zoning bylaw. Council will not make a decision at this public meeting, but will gather information and make a decision at a future regular council meeting. If any member of the public would like to be notified in writing of the decision made by council, they are to provide their name, mailing address, and email to me, the clerk, this evening via email at clerk@westperth.com. The person or public body may appeal a decision if they have made an oral submission at this public meeting or a written submission to council prior to the passing of an amending bylaw.
All right. As I mentioned earlier, this is a public meeting for a zoning bylaw amendment. The application D1418-2022 was initiated by Adam Perrin, Heather Perrin, and Robert Perrin. Proposed amendment affects the property described as Part Lot 22, Concession 8, Part 1, Plan 44R 2546, and Part 1, Plan 44R 2652 of the Fullerton Ward of the municipality of West Perth. I'll ask the clerk to please confirm that the notices were sent.
I can confirm notice was given by mail to all landowners within 120 meters of the lands affected by the proposed amendment, and that those agencies prescribed by legislation. A sign advertising tonight's meeting was also posted on the subject property on November 11th, 2022.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I'll now call upon Jerica Gilbert, planner for the County of Perth, to review the application and present any correspondence received. Jerica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor McKenzie, and thank you for letting me present this zoning bylaw amendment 18-2022. So this is near the community of Fullerton. It's part of the conditions of consent for B26-22, which was provisionally approved on October 11th of this year. So what we're contemplating today, so the severance was for a lot addition. So that means we weren't creating a new lot, but that we were adding land from one lot to another. And the lot in question that's receiving the parcel is 5808 line 24, which is also known as the Fullerton Cemetery. The official plan designation is agriculture, and the zoning of the subject lands is in the agricultural zone as well. So the purpose for us being here tonight is that we are going to rezone the portion that is part of the cemetery to institutional. We're also going to recognize some site-specific amendments too. So as you can see on the diagram here, so the portion on the left outlined in blue, that's the 0.6 acres that's going to be given over to the cemetery. It was previously thought to have been given earlier, but what happened in the late 90s is there was a technical error that resulted in the land not being registered correctly. So the area that is under contemplation has already been part of the cemetery for over 20 years. The portion of the property that is outlined in red is going to be zoned A-57 to recognize a reduction in the agricultural zone for an agricultural use under 54 acres. It's going to be 37.9 acres, which is actually the actual amount that is going to be still available for cropland, because the A-2 can also be farm. It will be, I believe, 47.9, I want to say, but the A-2 zone is not changing, so that's an official plan designation for a sand and gravel deposit. So that will remain the same. In addition to that, the portion that's being zoned institutional, we're going to recognize a minimum distance separation formula setback limit as lower. So originally, the swine barn that you see in the second picture, it was built in 1998. And if we go by today's standard, it should be set back about 1,217 meters from the cemetery. The current cemetery, it's only 105. And this lot addition will bring it 7 meters closer to about 98. Since we judged that there's not going to be any land use incompatibility with this, we deem that we should recognize the cemetery use and that this reduction, even though we don't normally like to reduce MDSF, is acceptable in this circumstance. And these pictures just kind of show that, so that's an aerial from the early 2000s, and you can see that tree line that's existing there. So both the barn and the part of the cemetery that's under contemplation are well established at this point and have coexisted harmoniously for a long time. The only comment that we received, and I received it after I submitted my report to you, was from the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. They have absolutely no objection to this application. It's nowhere near their regulated zone or near any known hazards. And as the report mentioned, this is within the North Thames Valley ANSI, which is area of natural and scientific interest, but we see no detrimental effects to the ANSI, so we're not worried about that as well. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and yeah, that concludes my presentation on the rezoning 18-2022.
Okay, thank you, Jerica. Are there anybody participating online that we're aware of? Nobody has indicated that. So I don't see anybody in our room tonight, but I'll still ask if there's anybody that wishes to speak in support or in opposition. And I don't think there is. The applicant or agent, is there anybody here to speak on behalf of that? None. Any general questions or comments from council? Okay, very good. So we're going to move on then to the next zoning bylaw amendment, number 14, 2022, which is the Hannon zoning bylaw amendment. And this is a public meeting for a zoning bylaw amendment. The application, as I indicated, is D14, 2022, was initiated by Hannon Holdings Incorporated. The proposed amendment affects the property described as Lot 29, Concession 3, 6736, line 36, the Logan Ward of the municipality of West Perth. And I will ask our clerk to please confirm that the notices were sent.
I can confirm notices were given by mail to all landowners within 120 meters of the land affected by the proposed amendment and to those agencies as prescribed by legislation. A sign advertising tonight's meeting was posted on the subject property on November 11th, 2022.
Okay, thanks, Clerk Hobson. I'll now call again on Jerica Gilbert, planner for the County of Perth, to review the application and present any correspondence received. So, Jerica?
Thank you again. So yes, this is zoning bylaw amendment 14-2022. Similar to our last application, this is part of a condition for consent. In this circumstance, a surplus farm dwelling severance, so B10-22. This application is northeast of Dublin, kind of between Dublin and Mitchell up there. So what we're doing today is part of a surplus farm dwelling severance. We're required to zone the residential parcel for only residential use, while we rezone the cropland to only be used for agricultural uses. So in this circumstance, the severed lot will be 2.7 acres and contain a house and 2 accessory structures. The retained farmland will be 54 hectares and contain 1 equipment shed. And then that small portion of woodlot up in around the middle of the lot, that's NRE 2, will remain NRE 2. So the retained lot will be A3, that's outlined in red. And then the severed lot will be A-1 subscript 6, which is always fun to encounter in the zoning bylaw. That subscript 6 means that we're going to recognize a deficient rear yard setback for an accessory structure. So the rear yard setback for the 1 equipment shed is going from 7.5 meters to 4.6 meters. And this is, we're okay with doing this because we want to ensure that the residential lot is kept to the minimum necessary. And we don't believe that there's going to be any issues. Often with rear yard setbacks, we're looking at land use compatibility, keeping the look of a lot. As you can see, so that's looking towards the shed, and then the smaller picture in the bottom right, that's looking out. It's all field. We don't have any concerns there. So honestly, that's all I have for this one. If anyone has any questions, I have received no correspondence for this application.
Okay, thanks again, Jerica. Again, I'll ask if there's anybody online wishing to participate, and the answer to that is no. There's nobody in our room here tonight with regards to this application. So I'm assuming that there's nobody here that wishes to speak in support or in opposition to the application. I don't believe the applicant or their agent wishes to say anything at this time either, which brings us down. Is there any general comments or questions from council members? And I don't see anybody.
Walter or Mayor McKenzie.
Oh,
if I may.
sorry. Nicholas.
I was wondering if you could walk us through Perth County Planning's thoughts on the 3 sheds and why some were going to be left with agriculture, some weren't going to be left with agriculture, and how you came to that conclusion.
Thank you, through you. Yeah, that's actually an excellent question. I wasn't the planner who did the severance. So I'm not entirely sure what they went through when they're determining this. But I do have to say it is definitely the hardest thing with these surplus farm dwelling severances is knowing which buildings to include as accessory to a residential use. So based on my site visit, I'm sure what ended up happening is the planner went out there. The one shed that's kind of up. Oh, nope. Oh, and that's not a very good view of it. Oh yeah, that's a better view of it. So the shed that's kind of closer to the house, that used to be an old, no, the one kind of in the center there. That's mostly just used for their residential equipment storage. The shed that was left on the farmland, there was actually an electrical business here. They're actually in the process of moving it off site, but it's much more modern. The doors are higher. So like, I can imagine being the planner on the file that it would have been difficult to justify leaving that 3rd building in as a residential use. Oftentimes it's a judgment call on the planner. And obviously if you've seen any land division committees where they kind of get disputed, like it's often a pretty hot topic, like how big we get that parcel to be. And generally we're trying to get it down as small as possible, but it can feel sometimes like, okay, why was that one out and these ones in? And I think that's kind of what they looked at it as, that one would be better for storing like agricultural equipment versus the other ones.
Any other questions? Okay, if there's no further questions, then I would like to Thank those in attendance for their comments. Should council proceed with the adoption of the zoning bylaw amendment, the notice of passing will be provided as prescribed by the Planning Act and a 20-day appeal period to the Ontario Land Tribunal. We will now close this public meeting at 7:40. Thank you, Jerica, and thank you for everybody that participated. All right, I have a couple of resolutions here that we'll deal with as a result of the public meeting. The first resolution is with regards to the first zoning bylaw amendment that we did with regard to the Perrin and Fullerton Cemetery. And it is that the Council Municipality of West Perth received a report titled Zoning Bylaw Amendment 18/2022 affecting lands described as Part Lot 22, Concession 8, Part 1, Plan 44R 22546, and Part 1, Plan 44R 2652, Fullerton Ward, Municipality of West Perth, as information, and that West Perth Council received the public comments related to this matter. We have a mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Foster, and seconded by Councillor Steve Harold. Thank you. It's been a hard day. Thank you. All those in favor? That is carried. The second resolution that I have is that Council Municipality of West Perth received a report titled Zoning Bylaw Amendment Number 14, 2022, affecting lands described as Lot 29, Concession 3, 6736, Line 36, Logan Ward, Municipality of West Perth as information, and that West Perth Council received the public comments related to this matter. We have a mover and seconder for that motion. Councillor Chessel and Councillor Phelps. All those in favor? Opposed? If any, that is carried. Thank you. Okay, that brings us down to item number 6 on our agenda, the reports. And the first report we have is 6.5, the Operations Manager Report. And Mike is not here tonight. He is under the weather with this flu bug that's going around that different people have had or are in the process of getting, I think. So I'm not sure, Jeff, are you going to walk us through that one? It's in the agenda for everybody's perusal.
Yeah, it's in the agenda package. The details of I guess the tender, if you want to ask questions of the tender. I won't be able to answer specific questions. We could wait. We'd like to approve this tonight if we can, as council, but if there's any questions that are require us to delay it, we'll delay it.
I can add, I did have a conversation with Mike this afternoon, and I haven't got the report in front of me, but we had a 3-year commitment with Daily. So it was tendered, it would have been 3 years ago, I guess. And so we got a quote for a 3-year period. And so now we're going and have asked for a 3-year quote again, I guess. There was a second bid that came in, but it didn't come in on time. And it also was more money than what the bid was that we got. So we really only have the one bid that we consider. Mike's recommendation, of course, is that we accept it. Maybe down the road, there might be a little bit more competition, but he said, when you look at it and consider that we haven't gone to the marketplace for 3 years, that we were committed, that it's higher, but it's not outrageously higher. So that's about the information I can give you. If there's any further questions, we can try and answer, but as Mike said, he'd like to get it done, and then we can, get our name in on the list for the springtime. The recommendation I have here, and I'll read it, and then decide you want to defer it, we can, I guess. that the Council of Municipality of West Perth award the 2023-25 dust control contract to Daily Dust Control products in the amount of $637,975, not including HST, and that the mayor and clerk are authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. We have a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Duck, Councillor Rose. Any further discussion? Nicholas?
I thought it was interesting that we're already starting out with a fuel surcharge because they're calculating that the diesel at 188 and it's already over that. Couldn't they have included at today's price instead of including the surcharge already at some arbitrary diesel price?
I can't answer the question. I don't know whether Jeff can. It would be when they picked that up, when they filled that tender form out, probably. Okay.
I would think that what they're doing is anticipating fuel prices for the time when the service will start. So the service won't start until April or May, and I have to pick a number. And I suppose it'd be nice if we were back to 188, be nice if we were back to 158. That would help us, but it's just a number.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, all those in favor of that motion? Opposed, if any, that is carried. All right, 6.6 Recreation Facilities and Parks Manager. So Darcy?
Thank you, Mayor McKenzie and Council. The report you have before you is the Cooperfield edition. Council passed the Cooperfield edition, the position of the field, and the 30,000 from Parkland Reserve back in June. They have now asked that if we could carry the project in our books. This is much similar to what we did with the Optimist Club. We carry the project in our books to save some HST and have our finance help out with that. It is pretty administration. It is not any levy impact because the money is coming from the Cooperfield fundraising and the money they have in their committee. But the project would go through our books. I'll gladly answer any questions.
And part of that, I guess, is so that they can collect, or we can collect, or whoever can collect the HST.
Correct. Yeah. So that gives them back the recoverable HST that municipality can recover would be off of the bills for the Cooperfield edition. Yeah.
Okay, questions for Darcy on that? All right, no questions then. Oh, sorry.
I just want to take a moment for some of the new counselors. So the way this works is the municipality can recover almost all of them, all of the HST. It's we lose about 1%. So if it's 13% HST, we recover 11.7 something. We're in that ballpark. And so the unrecoverable HST has to go into every project, but we do recover most of it. And every time we exercise this option, we want to make sure that we're not trying to help people with a way to get around HST. We're not. This is an asset that is on municipal land. It will go into the West Perth Municipal Asset Inventory. So it should be run through our books, but certainly helping them with the HST makes it more obvious that it should be run through our books.
Any other questions? All right, read the motion here then that the Council of Municipality of West Perth approved the request for an additional baseball diamond for the 2022 capital budget. We're a mover and seconder for that. Councillor O'Donnell, seconded by Councillor Foster. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Oh, is there a question? Sorry, Andrew.
Sorry, just one minor piece of confusion. Where is Cooperfield and why are we doing a baseball diamond edition at the same time as we're phasing out baseball diamonds in places like Dublin and Broadhagen, I believe?
Yes, so Cooperfield is in Mitchell. It's down on the end of Frank Street there. So it has the big hardball diamond. And they asked for council approval in June to add a diamond to that. Right now it's just a practice facility for the younger crew to practice on, as Ketterson and Cooperfield are very full. On the other thing, the Dublin and Broadhagen, we haven't really phased out those diamonds. Those diamonds are still available for use. I know the rec master plan had kind of spoke to be phasing those out, but as of right now, we still feel they're amenity that we have. They maybe aren't kept up to the exact standard of what we keep Mitchell due to logistics, but they are looked after and they are played on a regular basis.
Some of these rural diamonds too, they go through a phase and there'll be a big population of young people and baseball will come back. And then as those people get older and move on, then there's a little sag in the use. And we've seen that with what we saw with Cromarty, for example, too. And it was down and it's coming back up again now. And Fullerton is coming back up as well. So seems to be a phase that they go through.
It's a good advertisement for a project you're going to see. We are talking about doing the Recreation Leisure Services Master Plan update in the 2023 budget. It's in the capital. It'll be in the report. It's listed as one of the projects. It's in the report later. And I think when it comes to recreation planning like this, it's extremely difficult to just predict it. But the science of that Recreation Leisure Master Plan, with a lot of public consultation, gave us good data to work with. And Darcy's right. The last Recreation Leisure Service Master Plan said we should consolidate. That was a recommendation that we didn't fully act on because some organizations popped up and said they were interested in keeping those diamonds going. So we kept them going. We'll revisit. It's everything from ice time and ice utilization in other arenas right through to ballparks will be revisited in the updated Recreation Leisure Services Master Plan.
Okay, we've moved and seconded the motion. Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that one is carried. Thanks, Darcy. Brings us down to 6.7, and that is Wendy's part of the meeting, and she's got a few little things here she wants to talk to us about. So the first one is 6.7.1, the 2023 debt obligation. So Wendy, the floor is yours, probably for the next little while.
Thanks, Mayor Mackenzie and Council. I'm just gonna get my pages organized here. Okay, so the debt obligation. So this is municipality does carry a little bit of debt. So in the report, it talks about how the debt's calculated. It uses 2-year prior information in our information return to calculate that amount. And it's our debt repayment limit is 3.9 million. And currently we're using 520,000 of that. So only 13% of our debt load we're using. We have a lot of room for debt. Last year we took on, or this year we took on the fire truck at the kind of like the last couple months of this year. And that's the new piece of debt that we've acquired. If there's any questions on the debt, I gladly take it.
Okay, questions for Wendy on that? So pretty straightforward. It's on the screen there. If there's no questions, then the recommendation that we have is that the municipality of West Perth receive the 2023 debt obligation report as information. We have a mover and seconder, Councillor Rose, Councillor Fournier. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. And the next item is the investment report.
So the investment report kind of looks at our different mixture of things that we are invested in. Hannah, can you just move that's the debt one? You could move to the next report, actually. There we go. I just wanted to highlight some of our, I think we're ahead of report, sorry. I don't have my page numbers. Yep.
Page 324-ish. Yep.
So we have a few vehicles for investment. We have cash. We have long-term investments, which we have in GICs. And then we have the principal protected note. This is a guaranteed rate of return, or sorry, the principal is guaranteed. And we, through our findings that most of that fund is or is wastewater reserve. And then we also have the government business enterprise, which is earth. And in there, in here, I kind of highlighted our share portion, but there's also a little bit further to the full amount, and that's we have 2 promissory notes. One is with West Perth Power, and then we have a 1.1 million promissory note, and then we have Clinton Power, which is 900,000, which makes up the total investment of 3.9 million. So if there's any question on the investments, I'd gladly take them.
I'll ask first if there's any questions. I'm just wondering for the new counselors, if you want to, if you roll back the investment that you can just roll the screen back a little bit. The promise, no, what am I looking at here?
The principal protected
Principal
note?
protective note, because that's something that we're relatively new in, maybe what, 2 years?
Yeah, so we have two principal protected notes. One, it comes due in July 2026. And we also have another one that's due May of 2027. So those are kind of tied up. They're not liquid. I guess there would be a penalty if we were to take them out. And currently in the report, it shows that the valuation of them is showing, let's see. Yeah, the market value on them right now is 5.7 and the book value 6.1. So it wouldn't be recommended to pull them out right now.
Any questions on that? Okay. Then find my spot here. That's it for the information, the investment report.
Yeah, but
that's
just for
it.
information.
Okay, so the motion is then that Municipality West Perth receive the investment report as information. We have a mover and seconder for that. Councilor Harold, Councilor Phelps, all those in favor? That is carried. Okay, the next is the reserve report.
Okay, so the reserve report, I'll maybe just give a little bit more information on the reserves. The reserves can be, call them like your bank account, your savings account, and they're divided into different funds. And you have your reserve funds, and I put a definition in the report, but these are funds set aside by council and are not restricted by legislation. And then we have reserve funds, and then they're broken down as discretionary and obligatory. So those ones definitely fall, they're restricted, their requirements. It could be things like getting grant money, they have to be in separate bank accounts, development charges, that type of thing would fall into those categories. Land inventory held for resale, that is the Huron Business Park development. And then you have your equity again in the business enterprise, which is Earth. So in the report, we kind of looked at a chart. So if you could just scroll down to the next page, there's a chart that kind of shows our balances. And we show it this way. We show it in 2 views. One is your budget view, and then one's the actual view. And so the budget is what was passed in the last budget. And so in this graph, you can see how the funds were kind of distributed in and out of the reserves. So you have your opening balances, and then the transfer from is actually taking money out of the savings account and putting it in to carry the levy. And the transfer to is contributing to those funds. And so that's the ins and outs of it. So we went from the beginning of the budget process with $28 million. And at the end of the budget process, we ended up with 23 million. And then, but then there's an actual view, which is the next graph. And so this here is what's actually happened up until November 28th. And so As you can see, there's not as much activity. And the reason for that is oftentimes the capital projects are still being completed, and we don't want to transfer money around until we know the project's complete, just more efficient for staff time. Other reasons would be council resolutions throughout the year. So there was a couple mentioned in the report. So in 2021, there was a surplus distribution. Was outside the budget process. And then there was a traffic controller, Lions Park, federal gas tax, Cooperfield, and the library. There was all resolutions made throughout the year for that. Then usually at the year end, we do things to move some of the reserve funds. So those are the ones that are obligatory and restricted. And those are around your water, wastewater, and the building department, because they're self-funding departments. So again, we don't do those until the end of the year, just for efficiency. Is there any questions on the reserves?
Okay, questions for Wendy on that? No questions? All right, if there is no questions, then the recommendation that we have is that the municipality of West Perth receive, oh, sorry, there is a question? Okay.
I'm dreadfully sorry. This just occurred to me. Again, in reading about Bill 23, there's some mention of an obligation to allocate or spend 60% of money spent held in reserves by the beginning of 2023. I ran into that in several different places. Now, I'm not entirely certain if that's a general reserve fund or funds that have previously been set aside for a specific project. It seems that might be rather important to consider.
Not familiar with that, so I'll have to look back, but our DC, we don't have a lot of money in reserve for DCs. So we are sitting at, what am I looking at? 491,000 without any transactions this year. So it's quite low. Like if you were to look at other municipalities, they have millions of dollars in their DCs. So we run low just because we don't have large, we're not doing thousands of homes in a year. And so every home, new home kind of generates funds into that reserve.
Could I possibly track that that reference down for our next meeting, and perhaps we could message back and forth if it does turn into something that we have to do by the beginning of next year? It probably should be an item on the agenda for one of our meetings this month.
I'm going to say there's a new treasurer's report requirement, and that will flag that for us. But yeah, certainly I could take a look at in these contexts what it references.
I would just add, and this is a quick look, but your requirement to spend or allocate is in there. And the allocations either to water, wastewater, or services to highways. So I don't think it would be an issue. And I would just highlight that at this point, council's really just accepting this as information. So just so that's clear, and that we can certainly report back with more information.
Just want that the allocate's the key word there. So it's just a matter of allocating it so that it's just not sitting in general. It has to be allocated to one of the eligible categories, which a treasurer's report, which is required to be brought on an annual basis, does.
Nicholas?
Were you planning on doing the both parts of the recommendation at the exact same time? The directing unspent funds to a certain reserves, were you planning to do that? Right, if you were, then I have one comment on how we're directing the reserves. That would be the $200,000 that we are proposing put back into a working funds. I would prefer myself to put that $200,000 into tax stabilization. I don't think we need that additional dollars sitting in working funds. I'd rather use that, so have a total of the same amount going into reserves, but have a total of $464,000 going into the tax stabilization reserve instead of the $200,000 going into working, would be my preference. It makes it easier, I think, to get it back out the next time that we need it for tax stabilization.
Wendy, I can let you comment on that.
Moving, so that part of the resolution was more for capital projects. So if there was a carry forward, we're moving the carry forward money into a reserve and then we'll pull the reserve out for the 2023. But moving the working funds, the working fund reserve is just for cash flow. So it's up to council's discretion to move it.
So I would suggest that we leave working funds at 440,000 and take that 200,000 and put it into tax stabilization as well.
You're okay with that, Wendy?
So that motion, that was a motion, and I don't know my technical terms when you're changing a motion. So that motion came in from the surplus reallocation back in August.
So if I may, I think that what we're doing is putting the money back in the reserves where we got it. And there was a motion to allocate that money back in August. So this would require a reconsideration. It may require a reconsideration to change where we're going to put it now.
So if I may, Walter, so you're saying that in August, we said that we already knew that $200,000 was going to go back into working reserves. And we already knew at that time in August that $264,000 was going to go back into levy stabilization when we weren't even done the books at that point.
That was the surplus redistribution from 2021. So I think there was $1.7 million in surplus and 300,000 went to the Heron Park. And then the rest was redistributed to how the original motion from when we set the levy requirement for 2022. So it was kind of reversing that entry, but that happened in August.
Councillor Rose.
So, and again, it is complicated. If we do what's suggested, what we are technically doing is just whittling down reserves again, right?
No, if I may.
Go ahead.
So I'm just recategorizing where the reserves are being put. So the same $200,000 is, instead of under the name working reserve, it's under the name tax stabilization. So no, it would be the exact same dollars going back into reserves.
I understand that, but it's going to stabilize taxes and not going.
It's just
where
the
it was.
name called tax stabilization.
So it has nothing to do with the levy.
No,
Well, indirectly it does. Right?
Well, why
We-
would you use that word?
We use
didn't.
that to level out the levy at certain points. That's what it's there for. We don't necessarily go into it every year. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question or not, Murray, but yeah.
Kind of, but not really.
So the definition of our working reserve is that it's to help with cash flow. And it's to help when our timing of our funds. So in the event of January and February, we don't have the revenue being collected yet. So our first installments in February, if we had a big contract that was due, we would have secured $440,000 in our cash bank account to hold us. So that's the definition of the working fund reserve. And the definition of the tax stabilization would just be to use those funds during a time where the levy requirement was high and we wanted to reduce it.
Kind of what I said. Take it from here and put it over there. Would you suggest that we keep it in what you were suggesting as a bit of a cushion in case we got into trouble the next 2 or 3 months?
Knowing our current budget requirements, I think we're looking at a high increase this year, just based on where we were last year. We needed $10.5 million and we only raised $9 million. So we used the difference from the reserves. Knowing that fuel has gone up, inflation, construction. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm gonna say that the operations is gonna come in more. I think our levy requirement is gonna be high again this year, and we'll have to figure out what comfort level everyone's at to what's going to be the levy.
So I guess, go ahead, Nick.
You just delivered a investment report to us. And one of the investments that we have is a cash. You and I had a conversation, maybe it's okay to share that conversation. How many dollars do we have in cash sitting in the bank right now, just to give Murray an idea of whether we're in trouble or not?
So currently we have $9 million roughly in our bank account. In that bank account, we still have to pay the county and school board levy, which is about $2 million. And then we have $2 million to figure out for this building.
Yes, just to clarify, I didn't think we were in financial trouble. This is the same bantering we have every year, so it'll be year 5. We have not that any one is wrong, just 2 total different ways of looking at the same thing that I like to, my way of thinking is to keep some money in your back pocket because you never know what's happening, as opposed to spending everything you have.
Okay. No, I didn't know. Do you have another comment? Okay. I guess, you know, and the question was asked, and I'm not sure you really answered it. Your preference, what we do with that. Do we put it into working reserve? That was what your recommendation was, and I'm assuming that was what your preference is.
I think with everything going up in value, I think keeping your working reserve kind of going in that same direction, because, you know, payroll, things like that, it's increasing. So if your working reserve is shrinking, but your costs are increasing, I think it's smart to have a healthy working reserve. So my
Okay.
recommendation would be to leave it.
Okay, all right. So what we'll do is I'm going to read the motion the way it is. And I guess if you would prefer to change that motion. Actually, the other thing I could do is break it down into 2, couldn't we, Dan? That maybe would be the best way to do it under the situation. So we'll break that motion into 2 parts. So the first part is that the Council Municipality of West Perth receives the 2022 reserve report for information. So that one's straightforward. So if we can get a mover and seconder for that, Councillor Harold, Councillor Chessel, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Now we get into the second part of that motion, that the council direct the treasurer to move unspent funds drawn from property tax levy requirements for the 2022 capital projects into reserves. Mover, Councillor Rose, and a seconder, Councillor Foster. So again, any more further comments on this? Dean?
So when we say we're drawing it into reserves, we're drawing it into the working reserves then, Wendy? That's the intent?
Yeah, transfers to means that we're increasing the reserve.
And in effect, that would that not have the same effect as this? Oh, I guess my question would be then, if we don't have enough cash in the working reserve to cover the day-to-day costs, then what would be the alternative then?
We can use an operating loan through the bank, but we have to disclose that at the beginning of January. We've never used it.
So then that's in essence, the working reserve is the same idea as the tax stabilization. You're just drawing the money before you have to draw a levy from the taxpayers, correct?
Correct. So the reserves are all discretionary. So they can be moved, they can be used by council's discretion. Once you get into reserve funds, that's when you get into bylaws and there's other requirements. So whether it's in a working reserve or tax stabilization, it's all up to council to decide where to draw the funds from. They're all available.
would it make it a little more clear if we said into working reserves instead of just reserves? Would that maybe make it a little clear of what we're trying to do here? Okay, yeah, okay, I get, sorry, Wendy.
So just that, so I'm clear on what you guys are asking. Anything that wasn't spent this year, you want me to put it in the working reserve and then pull it out of the working reserve for the 2023? Or do you want staff would put it back from the reserve that it was like used from? So like roads, if there was a roads project that wasn't used, the funds or carry forward, we would typically put it in the roads reserve. We just didn't isolate the reserves because we didn't have that information at this time. I could always bring a more detailed list of the projects and the funds, but it wouldn't come until January, which is okay.
Go ahead.
I think this is not unlike what we do every year. We take the unspent money and we move it back into the areas where it wasn't spent from, and council will receive, and there will be a report that actually shows that distribution. I think Wendy at this point in time is just establishing council's intention that we're going to move the unspent into those reserves, but there will be a detailed list that comes as part of the budget process. So it just, the intent of this recommendation is really to establish that we're planning to put the unspent money into reserves. As a municipality, we like to use this approach so you don't run into the, and I don't think it's been a problem in the past, and I think the management team we have wouldn't abuse it, but you know, you've probably all heard stories about budgets in governments that if they don't get spent, they're lost. And it creates this motivation at the end of year for managers to spend things that they might not necessarily need because they have unspent funds. Those funds actually go back into the reserves of the department manager that saved them, which creates an incentive for good management, not a spending spree. And that's, we would anticipate, we're continuing with that.
So with that in mind, I think we probably should leave it just as reserves. And traditionally, we've done this the last meeting of the year. So we're a meeting earlier this year and how we do it. But we've done it even with some of the committee funding that they have, and we'll take it from that committee and we'll put it in a reserve for that committee to take out again in the new year. It's just a placeholder for it for the time being. So I think after reconsideration here, I think we'll just leave it the way it is in reserves, and it allows you to move it around. Murray? Okay, so the second part then of that, and I don't think we've had a mover seconder for that. Did we? Did we? Okay. Okay, that we direct the treasurer to move unspent funds drawn from property tax level requirements for 2022 capital project into reserves. So it's been moved and seconded. We had a bit of discussion. Any further questions on that? Okay, all those in favor of doing that, moving that, opposed, if any? That motion is carried. Okay, thank you. The next one then is our capital summary report.
Okay, so this one here, I'll just start with that we're not asking for any pre-approvals at this point. This is just an information. And when staff looked at it, the requirements were significantly higher, but we kind of prioritized them. And so we have priority 1, which would be mostly carry forward projects from last year. And then we have priority 2, and then priority 3, which is all projects. Looking at the all projects, staff felt that it was coming in quite high, knowing our budget pressures. So we go from priority 1 as being 1.3 million, priority 1 and 2 is 3.5 million on the levy, and all is 4.2 million. And last year we did 1.5 million on the levy. So we wanted to keep it relative to last year, and that's why priority 1 is being recommended. And then with the caveat that knowing what comes with the budget, and the operations, we'll be able to come back with a rate. And then council can choose that rate or go higher or lower. We're going to add more projects or take some off. And so these are the ones that were kind of identified as priority. So in the report, there's also all the capital sheets. I think there's 38 or 39 projects in total. They've been given descriptions and reasons why they need to be done. And the managers, if you had questions, they'll be able to answer them. I thought about afterwards, I should have sorted it so the priority ones are at the top, but next year I'll get there. So yeah, you can see, and each project was given a project number, and on the project sheet, the project number and the priority was listed. If there's
Okay,
any questions?
just, I guess for clarification, those are the projects. We're not approving them tonight. All we're doing is receiving the report. This is their, I guess it's Christmas. This is their shopping list. If you so like what they would like to do next year. Certainly when it gets to budget, that's when we're going to decide what, if any, or all of them are what we can afford. So right now, all we're doing is receiving the report. So any questions with regards to that or anything on there? Dean?
Through you, your worship. Wendy, on the report, you mentioned that, or it's mentioned that a project summary on the admin building will come to council once it's completed. Will that report be completed and given to council at some time during the budget deliberations?
Yeah, we paid the last PC and we paid the holdback, so we just have to put together the final numbers. I expect that we'll have that for you in early January, first or second meeting in January.
Okay, thank you. And my other question, I left my sheet at home, but there was on the individual sheets, projects were given a failure probability rating and a failure consequence rating. So I understand the idea behind the priority 1, 2, and 3, but I'm guessing that anything with given a high failure probability and a high failure consequence would be like the 1A priority versus the other priority ones on that we see here.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say that staff feel like all of the projects are of need, and just knowing our budget restrictions, that's why we put priority 1, 2, and 3. Other years we haven't. This year we just strategically put this forward. We don't want to come in with a 40% and then have to go back to the drawing board. We thought we'd try this priority 1, 2, and 3 and see where the levy requirement is going to land. So I would say they're all important. As far as the rating goes, there's no set criteria for staff to fill those out. So there's no set standard from 1 to 5 to rate it. So it's very subjective from the manager, their rating system.
And if I may add, I think it'll help Deputy Mayor Trenkowski to know that the operations manager identified the priorities and will have considered that risk of failure.
Did you have a question, Andrew?
Just very quickly, there's a mention on here about sidewalk replacement for the upcoming year. Before we actually get around to budgeting next year, could I possibly find out who owns the sidewalk in Stafford? Does Perth County own that, or do we? Can we assume it if they own it because they're not doing anything with it? Just leave that to you.
Yeah, between Mike and I, we'll figure that out. Back to you.
I'm assuming because it's on a county road, but I shouldn't assume anything, but county's responsible for the road. I know when it went through Dublin a number of years ago, they replaced the sidewalk in Dublin. So I'm guessing it maybe is a county road, but staff will certainly look into that and find, or county sidewalk, I meant to say, and they'll find out Okay. Any other comments or questions? Oh, keep pushing the button all the time. That the municipality of West Perth received the 2023 capital summary report as information. Do we have a mover and seconder to that? Councillor Phelps and a seconder, Councillor O'Donnell. Thank you. Any further discussion? Last kick of the cat here. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Okay, and moving on, the next one is with regards to a 10-year capital plan.
So staff are bringing this report forward because we see it's challenging owing to look at 1 year at a time. Definitely managers have this information, it's just not all put together on one sheet and one view. And listening to the strategic plan, hearing about the arena and big projects happening with water and wastewater, I think it's good practice to put down a 10-year capital plan so we can look out into the future and see what's coming. Also, it would help for investment purposes. If we know year 2027 is going to be a heavy capital year, certainly want to make sure the investments aren't locked during that year. And so it also would help with succession planning. I think as new management comes in, knowing what is on the card for projects would be helpful for them. And this is one tool that we could do to do that. And we would recommend that we would revisit the plan every year. So we'd lay it out for 10 years, but then review it every year and move it accordingly. Any questions?
Questions for Wendy on that? It's not unusual for municipalities to do that. I think certainly, I believe it's the City of London does that. I'm not sure if Stratford does or not, but I know there's larger municipalities do a 10-year plan. And you can vary from it because there's going to be some times when things don't go as they should, and you'll have to bump things around. But it's a good roadmap, I think, for the future for budget purposes. So, any comments on that? If not, the recommendation is that we direct staff to implement a 10-year capital plan for the 2024 capital budget, 2024 to 2033. We have a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Foster, Councillor Fournier. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you. That's carried. All right, brings us down to 6.7.6, which was the one that was added tonight. You call that a walk-in? Is that what you call it? I've never heard it called that before. Okay, Wendy, are you going to talk to us about this one?
Yep. So Ritz Lutheran Villa approached us to extend the loan. So we're on there as a guarantor. And so in order to sign it, or for them to extend the loan, they need the guarantor to sign a loan agreement with them. So that it extends to June 30th, 2023. And then they're also asking, so we have a loan with them, 1.6 million. They're prepared to pay the 6 and leave $1 million on for a loan. And the terms would be 2 years and 3.5. And their monthly payment would include principal and interest. Currently, they've only been paying interest, but their commitment would be principal and interest. So it's about 43,000 per month. If there's any questions, I'll take them.
Okay, Jeff, maybe you want to give a little bit of history. I see Alex has got a question, so maybe do a little bit of history about this loan, give you a bit of information, and then if you still have questions, I'll ask at that time.
Sure, and I think to be fair to the new councillors, we should probably provide a bit more history. And this developed fairly quickly for us. But back about 2 years ago, when Ritz, it's a very high priority for this community to have a long-term care facility, and a very high priority to redevelop the long-term care facility that we have in Mitchell, which is a consolidation of the beds that they had in the old Ritz Villa and the Mitchell Nursing Home into a single state-of-the-art facility with Class A beds. Through the process, the villa is a not-for-profit, did a lot of fundraising, and we found out as a staff and council that there are extraordinary hurdles for not-for-profits to get access to money and do these redevelopments, which is discouraging because there are hundreds of them to be redeveloped in Ontario. Many of them are owned by not-for-profits. Not-for-profits are seen as being motivated by quality care and less motivated by profit. So you want not-for-profits to succeed. It's difficult for them to succeed. So through the process of RITS doing their financing, they found that while they had fixed term contracts for the project, they actually had to have more construction money available to them because a third party, for regulatory reasons, evaluated their project and said it was worth more than it was costing them to get it. So that's great news. They were basically told they're getting a $28 million facility for $24 million, but it required them to have more of a foundation going into it. And they came to the municipality with two requests, and they came successively. The first request was for a guarantor agreement to back them. And of course, with the significant municipal interest, the municipality of West Perth signed on for that guarantor agreement. So in other words, we're guaranteeing them like a parent might guarantee a child, but we're quite satisfied with the business plan that they had. And then later, because of the quantity service survey showing a larger value than what their contracts were, ironically requiring them to come up with more money, we provided them with a $1.657, whatever the number is, $1 million loan with an interest rate of 2.45%. And in both cases, council considered these matters. The decisions are made to make RITS successful, which makes us successful. And I would just close this by saying there was very minimal risk for us to do this, and it was a very, very important community asset. We obviously asked that they look everywhere else before they come to us, but they had to come to us. If there was any risk then, there's way less risk now because the building is almost there for being substantially complete. And of course, with the value of things, if it was worth 28 million when they built it, it's probably worth considerably more than that now. And it is a state-of-the-art long-term care facility in our community that is an absolute gem for West Perth.
Okay, with that little bit of history, further questions? Councillor Foster.
How much are they paying a month in interest now?
So the interest rate that they would have, so the guarantor doesn't require them to pay interest. They simply, we have to say we're there for them. The loan interest rate was 2.45. And the request they made this time is that we give them the loan. Wendy, the terms were 2 years principal and interest at 3.5. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, currently they're paying about $3,900 a month in interest.
So they're asking for less money and they give us more in interest each month anyways?
Correct. Yeah, because they realize that we're probably making more money on other investments, and they wanted to put forward a rate that would be entertained, I guess.
Okay, I just wondered. Thank you.
Other questions? Andrew?
So the old Ritz Lutheran Villa is being closed?
No, they're renovating. I think they said there's 3 phases. So the Doug might have more.
I happen to be employed at the villa for 13 years. So what happened was the standards for the rooms changed. So they used to be A, B, C, D, and your room standard was part of your funding envelope. So D, which was like Mitchell Nursing Home, was 4 to a room. C was, and it has a lot of criteria: square footage, recreation area, washroom area. And what happened was the villa was built in 74 as a retirement home initially and developed into long-term care. So it was initially built as retirement. It wasn't built as a facility to house long-term care, which made lifts and handicap accessible and things like that. So as it aged, they needed to upgrade. And it was really, it's a government thing to, in order to get maximum funding and bring things up to current standards, they had to redevelop. And the building was old. It was starting to have issues. I was the maintenance guy there. So yeah, it was wore out. So that is what the whole development project came up, and we are just, it's like this. If those beds were available for sale, they'd be gone and they wouldn't be here. They would be in London or Kitchener or somewhere else. Like Jeff said, we are fortunate to have the availability of having our relatives and friends and our senior population have a place to go and choose to go. And it's an amazing, and I think they're what, second largest employer or third?
I think they might be the highest
Number one now.
employer in West.
Yeah. Since Standard closed, and yeah, 24-hour care. So there's a lot of people working out there. So it's a huge asset for our community.
And I would mention that it is a redevelopment. The new building will take the 128 beds. There were 131 between the two previous sites. And we're not aware of if they have any plans for the old building, which is wrapped around the new building, but presumably they will go into a planning phase to make a decision about what to do with the building that they're moving out of.
The Mitchell Nursing Home is the one that they're going to close, and it's older than the villa, I believe. So they're taking, and the villa owns both buildings now. At one time, they were two separate operations, but the villa owns them both. And so this redevelopment project is they're going to take the beds from Mitchell Nursing Home and the Ritz Villa, and then it becomes the West Perth Community, I believe, or whatever the new name is, West Perth Village, I guess. So the Mitchell Nursing Home will be closed, but those beds are just going to move across the river and down the road to where the villa is, so that they'll still remain in the West Perth community. Okay, any other questions on that? All right. So we do have a fairly lengthy recommendation here. So I'll read it, and hopefully we can get a mover and seconder and get it dealt with. The Council of Municipality of West Perth hereby acknowledge the request from the Ritz Lutheran Villa to extend the municipality's commitment as a guarantor, and the municipality renew the loan to the Ritz Lutheran Villa for $1 million with interest at 3.5% per annum. The mayor and clerk be authorized to enter into a necessary agreement and any other related documentation to fulfill the request, subject to the content of such agreement being satisfactory to the chief administrative officer and municipal solicitor. Do we have a question? Wendy.
Can I just add, I should have put in there for a 24-month period.
Okay, no, that's a good idea. So for 24 months, period of 24 months. Okay, question from Councillor Duck? No. Somebody had their, I know, Andrew, Dean had his hand up. Okay, sorry.
No, I was also raising my hand to move the motion.
I thought somebody had their hand up over there, but maybe I'm just seeing things there again. Okay, so Dean, you want to move that and Ryan wants to second that then? Is that okay? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That was carried unanimously. Thank you. All right. Nothing more, Monday?
No, I think I.
It's kind of your show
quite a
tonight,
bit.
wasn't it?
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
I don't have a report for you tonight under 6.9, but I want to just mention to council to watch your email. I'm going to send you an email tomorrow morning with a reminder to finish your homework from last Monday evening strategic plan session. So I'll email you the worksheet and just ask if you can fill in the answers to those last few questions and submit them. And we're going to give you till the end of the week this week to get that homework done. So just watch for an email from me. Thank you.
And I'm going to give you a comment. I would sooner we have her come back and spend the time with her than do the homework.
So actually, it's a great question, and council, I just had a conversation with Catherine this morning, so now I am making a report. She offered to do a Zoom session with us to work our way through those last questions, if you would like, at no extra cost for the contract, which, you know, we squeezed her for time. And if council would like that, we can go with that approach instead of the homework approach. And I'm sensing by the nods around the room that I'll do that instead, and I'll set that up for a future council meeting. We'll just need about an hour to finish that project.
I'm just going to clarify something. It wasn't we that stressed her for time. I think it was the CAO that had a little talk beforehand. If we'd have had her come and do her thing at 5:30, I think we would have accommodated everything.
Yeah, you caught us. We squeezed 3 meetings into 2. You're on to us. So
So I don't think you need a motion, but I'm looking around the room and I think everybody would be in favor. We'll have another meeting and have a Zoom meeting with her and finish that up. I think that would be more agreeable to everybody here. So don't send the email out.
great, I won't. And I'll set it, I'll confirm it. We'll do it with us in person, but Catherine will just provide her instructions by Zoom and I'll carry the laptop around and you can look at her, and that will put us back into a session where we do, this will be a follow-up. We'll go back into workshop format again, but we'll just add it on to a council meeting. And I'm not sure if the 19th is going to have enough time or we have to leave that for the January meeting, but we'll let you know.
I know there's a question and I'm assuming that Councillor Foster's probably got his homework all done.
I was just going to ask if it was going to be part of a regular meeting, but he answered that.
Yeah, we'll work it in we might have a short meeting coming up in the very near future and then we could add that on to it. We certainly don't want another stretched out meeting till 10 o'clock or whatever. I think we work it in as best we can. Andrew.
In reference to the homework, I was wondering if there's any chance Jeff could put together a quick list of relevant legislation that would accompany doing the strategic planning. I'm actually rather enjoying reading these documents, and I was hoping you might have extra homework for me, if you don't mind.
I think I'm going to actually try to meet with all the new counselors to have a chance to just get to know you better and to ask these questions and figure out how we can support you best. So I'm going to leave it till we have that meeting and then maybe we can scope down. And I'll try to do those meetings next week with you all. I'll also chase you down for that. So.
Okay, glad we got that all clarified. Correspondence, everybody got a copy of the letter from John Rutledge, who was here the night of the official opening, and he enjoyed working with us, apparently. No council reports, I don't believe that I'm aware of anyways. Oh, okay, so we received the correspondence, just that we received the correspondence as information. So mover and seconder to receive the correspondence. Councillor Foster, Councillor going again here. Duck. Twice in one night. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay. Got a lot of stuff on my mind here right now. Okay, so council reports, none, bylaws, none, announcements. I think the Lions Club had a very good parade the other night. I was unable to attend because I wasn't feeling really great that night. So, but from all information I got online and comments that I've talked to people, it was a tremendous parade. So, Nicholas?
Could I take the time to say it was quite an exciting day in Southwestern Ontario for electricity today? So Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Premier Doug Ford were in Ingersoll to announce a large-scale EV battery manufacturing facility. I was also along with the Ontario Minister of Energy, Smith, to make an announcement today as well too. that we announced now Mitchell and Dublin residents can download their energy, minute by minute energy data right from the website, and you can take that data and then make informed decisions on energy consumption. So that's ready to go. We had a little do with the minister today and there as well too.
Very good, very good. So if I remember right, Cami is Earth's largest user of electricity.
Well, it was,
Oh,
it's close now
salt
with,
mine.
yeah, exactly. It's very close with the Goddard now
Yeah.
and the salt mine there.
Right, okay, good, good. No, I noticed that on the news site. It's certainly a good news story. Upcoming events, so the next meeting is December the 19th, and it remains to be seen, I guess, how much is going to be on that meeting. Any notices of motion? Other business? I do have an item under other business, but I'm not going to talk about it tonight. I'll talk about it just down the road, maybe at the next meeting. I got to do a little bit more homework on it. Andrew?
Just wanted to know when we find out what committees we're on.
Oh, we're meeting on the 14th to, as a striking committee, so you'll know by the 19th. There is no closed session tonight, I don't believe. So the next item then is a confirmatory bylaw, and the recommendation is that bylaw 72, 2022, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of Corporation Municipality of West Perth, be read first and second time this 5th day of December. We have a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Rose. I'm going to take somebody over here this time, Alex. Councillor O'Donnell. Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. And bylaw number 72, 2022, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of Corporation Municipality of West Perth, be read a third time and finally passed on the 5th day of December. So moving seconder for third reading, Councillor Foster, Councillor Duck, all those in favor? That is carried. And finally, a motion that we do adjourn at 8:47. Moving seconder for that, Councillor Harold and Councillor Phelps, all those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We are adjourned.